Hey everybody, today we're going to finish up the week with a poll about 2028 and who each side is leaning toward. Spoiler, it's going to be Vance and Kamala Harris. So we'll take a look at the frontrunners, we'll talk about it, but first we're going to go through this poll here from economist YouGov. This came out within the past couple of days. So before we get to 2028, we're going to go through some of this other data. Now we're not going to cover all of it, but let's see what they've got here first. They've got few Democrats say they are enthusiastic about current Democratic Party politicians. So with the U.S. adult citizens about the Democratic Party, only 5% are enthusiastic about them. With the Republicans, it's about 3 times that. It's at 14. Satisfied but not enthusiastic is 20% for the Dems, 21 for the GOP. Not sure is at about 16 or 17 for each of them. And dissatisfied but not upset is 25 for the Dems, 13 for the Republicans, and upset, that's actually higher for the Republicans, 37%. It's 33 for the Dems. Now just among Democrats, not a lot of enthusiasm. 11% are excited about their own party. Now, on the other end, you also don't have that many Democrats that are upset, only 9% with their own party, but 66% are upset with the Republican Party. Now, with independents, it's going to be a little bit more mixed. 36% are upset with the Dems, 41% with the Republicans. For enthusiastic, you've got 2% of independents for the Dems and 5% for the Republicans. And in the bottom, with the Republican Party, 35% of Republicans are enthusiastic. For upset, it's all the way down there at 4%. So there's a clear imbalance. Democrats not excited, but that makes sense because they just came off a pretty significant loss just a few months ago. It's going to take some time. Could easily be 6 months, 12 months, maybe after the midterms. I think we saw something similar after the Republicans lost Senate seats in Georgia a few years ago. It looked like Republicans were in disarray. They just came off a loss for president, and there was a divide on if Trump is toxic or if he's the path forward. Well, once you jump ahead, we all know how that turned out. So it looks bad for the Dems right now, but I don't think that's necessarily a permanent problem. Let's go down here to the next section. Here's the Americans' views on the ideology of both parties. For the Democratic Party, 46% of U.S. adults say they're too liberal. 23% say about right, 18% not sure, and 14% say not liberal enough. Now, just with Democrats, it's going to be more split. 15% say they're too liberal. 23%, a little bit more, say they're not liberal enough. Independents are at 37% too liberal. 15% not liberal enough. And Republicans, of course, it's overwhelming. 84% say too liberal. With the Republican Party being too conservative, that number is going to be at 41% of U.S. adults. 29% about right, 17% not sure, and 13% not conservative enough. With independents, it's going to be 41% say too conservative. 11% not conservative enough, and with Republicans, 12% say too conservative, 23% not conservative enough, and a whopping 58% say about right. So again, based on that, it looks like the Republicans are a little bit more unified. But that's what this next section is about. Are the parties more united or divided? 23% of adults say the Democratic Party is united. 51% say they're divided. It's pretty much the inverse for the Republicans. 52% say united, 23% divided. With Democrats, they view both parties very similarly. About 38 or 39% say both parties are united, and about 32% say they're divided. Now, I think with almost every question, the wording can have an impact on the results. You could say that they're united in their opposition to Trump, but maybe they're divided on the approach or certain issues. So I think some of this is going to be open to interpretation. Let's go down here. Who do Americans say the Democratic and Republican parties care about? There's going to be a gap on some of these. The highest one for the Democrats is going to be immigrants at 67%. Now, you might think that perception is a good thing, but I would think out of all the different groups, including Americans, that might not necessarily be a strength. Now, for the Republicans, that number is down to 29. Now, on that side, maybe you think that number is too low, but the Dems are also ahead on American women, 58 to 49. Wealthy Americans goes to the GOP by a 30-point margin, 87 to 57. Hispanic Americans, Dems are at 56, Republicans 42. Black Americans, 55 for the Dems, 43 for the Republicans. Based on these other results, I would think that would be a wider gap. Then we've got Americans born in the U.S. Here's where that group is perceived to be more cared about by the Republicans, 70 to 53. With white Americans, it's going to be Republicans at a big 81, Dems 53. American men, Republicans at 77, Dems at 50. Poor Americans, 48, Republicans 39, and middle class is going to be pretty much tied at 50 for the Republicans, 48 for the Dems. And for how much the party cares about the needs and problems of you, it's dead dead even at 42 apiece. So a lot of these are the groups that both parties stereotypically put ahead of other people. But in the end, it looks like it might all even out, and you is all the way at the bottom. The next section here is about Social Security. The first part asks, which comes closest to your position on Social Security? For all adults, 56% say it should be given more funding. 24% say given the same level of funding. We've got 13% that say they're not sure. And then way down from there, we've got 4% that say given less funding, and 3% say it should be eliminated. So it's clear, Social Security, it's popular. That's not a mystery. Almost no appetite to even make cuts, let alone eliminate it. Now, what about the perception of each party? Well, there's going to be a big divide on this one. For the Democratic Party, 37% think that party wants to give it more funding. For the Republicans, it's down there at about 15. Now, on the other end, 4% think the Democrats want to eliminate it, while 27% think the same about the Republicans. So this is always an issue that the Democrats are going to be favored on. Republicans are viewed as more likely to want to raise the retirement age, make cuts, or privatize it. That kind of stuff is not going to be popular. So when the Democrats are out of power like they are now, they usually talk up this issue more, as they should, since it favors them. Then once they're in power, they've got other issues, and they actually barely end up strengthening Social Security. But let's keep going. Let's go down here to abortion. So where do Americans stand on it? 23% think it should be legal in all cases. 35% legal in most cases. We've got 6% not sure, 28% illegal in most cases, and 7% illegal in all cases. But the perceived position of the Dems is going to be 46% legal in all cases, and for the Republicans, it's going to be 37% illegal in all cases. This is an issue that I think a lot of Americans are not big on the two fringes. If you're looking to win an election and avoid a lot of controversy, you want to be in this sweet spot somewhere right here. That's going to be wanting it legal in a good chunk of circumstances, but definitely not legal in some others. Both sides really try to dance around this issue because I think they don't want to upset the two fringes. Anyway, let's go down to the next part before we get to the 2028 section. This also asks about DEI program funding. 19% think it should be given more funding, 25% given the same level of funding, 18% not sure, 6% less funding, 32% eliminated. And the perception of the two parties is pretty much going to be at opposite ends of the spectrum on this one. Now, with most issues, there's always going to be some nuance to it once you look more into it. But this is one that I think tends to potentially more so benefit the Republicans. Universal, non-discriminatory programs, I think, are the way to go to win a wide swath of the electorate. It's going to mean avoiding having every policy centered around group identity or historical power imbalances. Think Social Security, which we just took a look at. It's been around a long time. The program is widely popular. I think it'd be extremely difficult to get something like that passed today. Republicans probably not likely to want to give out that financial support. But then on the other side, Dems would likely want to include a bunch of identity-based considerations throughout the entire policy. That's at least the simplified direction of the way that I see it going, and I think a good chunk of Americans would also agree. Now let's get down here to 2028. First, they ask if both sides are looking for a nominee who agrees with your own position on most issues, or a nominee who can win the general election in November. The Democrats say 58% are looking for a nominee that can win. 42% are looking for one that agrees with your position on most issues. For the Republicans, it's flipped. 62% of them are looking for somebody that agrees with them on the issues. 38% are looking for a nominee that can win the general election. Now, that could be a problem for the Republicans. We've seen them nominate controversial or weaker candidates over the past few cycles in different races. A lot of times that cost them because they were sticking to their issues and not looking for somebody that could win. Now, that has its strengths and its weaknesses. You definitely want to stick to your values, but you also want to win an election. So if Republicans are going to put up more controversial candidates again and again, that's going to be a big opening for the Democrats. Now, the Dems could actually do the same thing. They could put up a highly controversial, super progressive candidate. There's going to be places and situations where that could hurt them as well. But it's clear that once you're out of power, like the Democrats are right now, more of them just want to get back into power. They don't really care as much about the values. So I'm not really surprised by these numbers. Now let's go down here and look at the 2028 Democrats. So they break it down into two tiers. Would you consider voting for this candidate, or are they the ideal candidate? Well, way at the top here is Kamala Harris. 58% would consider her as a candidate. 29% think she's the ideal candidate. That's way ahead of everybody else. Second place is Buttigieg at 39 and 9. Then you've got Tim Walz, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Gavin Newsom, Cory Booker, Gretchen Whitmer, and Mark Kelly is at the bottom. That's everybody that they show right here. Now, there's no surprise Harris is at the top. She was the vice president. Every Democrat knows who she is, and a lot of them actually think she's a decent candidate. So just because Mark Kelly is down there at the bottom, he might be the better candidate, but way more voters just are not too familiar with him at this point. Now, given we're so far away from the 26 midterms, let alone anything for 28, I expect to see Harris here at the top for the time being. Now, I don't think she's a great candidate. I've said that throughout the past couple of years. It doesn't mean she could not win in the next election. Almost any Democrat could if there's a big enough backlash to the Trump administration. However, she did already take a loss on the biggest stage. I think she has clear vulnerabilities, and I don't think she would actually win a Democratic primary if she went through the process. I think inevitably another star would rise up, and there would be new energy and new enthusiasm for somebody else. It could be somebody else that's not even remotely on the radar at this point. But I think right now, just because we're only a few months after the last election, Harris is going to kind of just be the default choice because of the familiarity. And then we could go down here and look at the Republicans. And this is not going to be a surprise either. At the top, J.D. Vance, 69% would consider him to be a candidate, and a huge 44% think he's the ideal candidate. Way down from there is going to be Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump Jr. Now again, this is not surprising whatsoever. Vance is the VP, he's the likely successor, just like we saw with Harris under Biden. Now Vance, I think, is doing a decent job at proving himself to the Trump base. Now you might hate everything about him, but to be fair, I think he's young enough and he speaks well enough to be able to carry that torch forward. Now the problem for Vance is it's just too early. There could be a big enough backlash to the Trump administration, or Vance could get himself into a huge scandal. If that's the case, then none of these Republicans are going to be able to win in 28. But if there's going to be any kind of competition and Vance is interested in running for president, he might have a pretty easy path to the nomination. Now all this is very preliminary. I would expect more to change with the Democrats than the Republicans for 28. There's always a small chance that there's somehow little opposition, and it is just Harris and it is just Vance. I'd be surprised if that happened, especially with Harris, but so much could change over the next year or two. Now we'll look more at 28 in just a moment, but the last thing on this poll we're going to look at is, do Americans think Trump will try for a third term, and do they think he should be allowed to? 56% think he definitely or probably will try for a third term. 28% think he definitely or probably will not, and only 20% think that he should be allowed to. 68% think he should not. So this is pretty overwhelming. Most adults think that he will try to run for a third term. Now the other day I put out a poll on the community tab asking something very similar. I asked, how likely is Trump to make a serious run at a third term? This is totally the opposite result. Only 13% say it's likely, 20% say 50-50, and almost two-thirds, 65% say it's unlikely. So this goes to show that maybe you get different results from poll to poll. Maybe the question wording had a big impact, but these results don't line up whatsoever with that poll from YouGov. Now let's go back to that poll real quick, back to 2028. Now here's the more detailed breakdown, and I'll scroll through this real quick, but feel free to pause it, and of course the links will be down below in the description. But this is going to ask the same thing about the Dems and the Republicans. Who would you consider voting for, and who's your ideal choice? Some of these numbers don't perfectly match up with what we took a look at just a couple of minutes ago, but they're going to be similar, and if you want to take a look at them, they're going to be right here. And you can also see the sample size of this poll was 1,626 U.S. adult citizens. Now let's wrap it up with the full 2028 polling on Wikipedia. So here's this poll we just took a look at from YouGov. J.D. Vance is at 43%, and he's leading all the recent polls since Trump got back into office. If it's not Vance, it looks like it would be a battle between DeSantis and Trump Jr. So who knows, maybe Vance doesn't run, there's going to be a ton of infighting on the Republican side. Then, just like with the Dems, it could be one of these candidates, or it could be somebody else that's not remotely on the radar. But then finally with the Democrats, on race to the White House, she's in the lead with 19.6%. And then here's the recent poll again from YouGov. Now this 25% for Harris is actually a little bit lower than some of the recent polls where she was in the mid-30s. This column here that says other at 20% and undecided at 25. Those are the key columns that I think are going to be fluctuating over the next year or two. Eventually, I would either expect Harris to fizzle or fizzle once the primary season actually starts. If it's not Harris, I really have no idea who it could be. I think the Dems do need a shakeup like Trump did with the Republicans. They should go in a more populist, maybe progressive direction on economics and move away from anything identity-based. There's going to be plenty of different issues that they could focus on. But the sad fact is, I think that they're most likely hoping that public sentiment shifts against the Trump administration, and they mostly just say that they're not the the Republicans, and then they're going to get things back to normal. But the problem is we just had that with Biden. So if we're just going to go back and forth between the same two dynamics every 4 years, and if either party never actually learns any lessons and they just rely on a 1 or 2% shift among the swing state voters, then we're going to be stuck with the same stuff every time. Anyway, there's a lot more you could say about this, but I don't want to go on forever. That's a look at this poll from YouGov, some of the current issues, and a look at 2028. So let me know in the comments. What do you think about anything in this poll? Do you think it's actually going to be Harris in 28? If it's not her, who do you think is going to rise up? And what about Vance? Do you think he's the obvious successor to Trump, or do you think he's going to end up fizzling out? And which issues do you think each side should focus on? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.